So, yeah, this is the vibe behind it. So, released in 1984, Careless Whisper. Its original tempo was 77 BPM. So it's a ballad. It's down tempo. Its musical key is D minor 7A. Now, to turn this into a dance track, the vision for that, a lot of people have done this, and if you search YouTube, you'll find this. A lot of people have taken there is a kind of an a cappella available on the internet of George's lead vocal, but only the lead. The backing vocals were not on that particular file. So we'll come to the challenge that faced earlier on. And of course the vocal was hit down with all the big 80s reverb and everything. So the main vocal was there, but without the backing vocals. So it was incomplete. So at 77 BPM, a lot of people who have attempted to remix this have turned that 77 BPM into, say, 120 or 125, which ends up sort of like, I'm never going to cry again, guilty rhythm, got no feeling, which is just delivered totally wrong. You know, the song is a very beautiful, deep, emotional song, and as such, if it's going to be turned into a track that you can dance to, it needs to be musically and rhythmically sympathetic. So how did we go about this? So basically, that's the target, a deep house vibe, and the new tempo needed to be about 125, 126. So the way it was done is to reduce this 77 BPM down to 63 BPM. So in effect, we're slowing George's vocal down. But by doing so, he's not doing the da-da-da-da-da. He's actually, the vision was to sort of make him flow, or let the rhythm carry the pulse of the dance floor energy. But because it's such a dreamy, floaty kind of vocal, taking it down from 77 to 63, which is quite a drop in tempo. Once you translate that, once we put that a cappella over a house beat, it immediately locked in as like, wow, this is incredible. So there's a BPM reduction of 14 BPM already. So within the actual vocal side of it, as I said, there was an a cappella of George's vocal straight from the desk, but without the backing vocals. So the challenge, first of all, was like, okay, well, how do we get the musical parts, because it's so seminal. Yes, I could have remade most of the production, but not that iconic sax solo, of course, but I could have changed, taken the chords and just made some new synths, but I wanted to have the purity of the original version in this remix. So the challenge then was actually how to get those instruments and how to get the backing vocals that I needed to complete the work. So just going, there are a lot of you would have heard of stem extraction technology, which is basically the ability to take a master, two-track master, and rip the stems. This technology has been burgeoning and moving over the past few years, and it's getting pretty awesome now, to the point where you can actually take a track and remove the vocals and separate the instrumentation and the drums on different kind of levels. And just going over to the main screen, so this is what we primarily use. It's called RipX. It's on hitandmix.com, and Deep Remix is the actual program, and this actually takes a snapshot of the frequencies and allows us to go in there and extract certain things. What it ends up looking like is a bunch of notes all over the screen, and but with that comes artifacts, which are kind of noises, and because it's looking at frequencies and trying to isolate a vocal. So if a vocal has a frequency and an instrument has a frequency, it's the same. That can bleed into it. So it's a very intricate, difficult process to actually go in and extract these and make it a decent a cappella. And the same goes with the instrumentation. You can separate the instrumentation, but it kind of comes as a package. You can't just say, oh, I want the saxophone, even though I kind of did a bit of magic on this and made it kind of work. And I want this keyboard. And it's kind of like you get the drums, the bass, the instrumentation, and the vocal if you're lucky. But this isn't the be-all and end-all. We use other elements. There's a website, I think it's called lalale.com or something, and it's a very good algorithm which you can pay to put stuff on, and it extracts it for you. And I have various other technologies that I use as well to get these things. So very much those are the elements that kind of helped build the actual a cappella and the instrumentation. And you'll see how kind of beautiful they sound. And the other thing is, once, you know, in pure isolation, they are quite, you can hear artifacts, but once you get them in the track, the hi-hats, the other bass, the different frequencies of instrument tend to fool the ear into feeling that this is pretty much a pure a cappella. The results aren't always perfect, it depends on the source material, of course, but it can actually be pretty awesome. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's go to the screen over in Logic, and we'll have a look at what's happening here. So usually when I'm looking at these things, I kick off with the percussion. You've got the vibe behind it, how we actually made it work, a vocal actually from a ballad into a house track. So usually I kick off with looking at the percussion, then the bass, then the instrumentation, and then we end up back with the vocal, and then some other effects, etc. Okay, so let's move on. So the drums, I've muted George for the moment. So let's have a look at the drums first of all. Now with this track, it needed to be really a solid, deep house vibe. I couldn't just sort of slam in a kind of banging, funky house, new disco, massive kick drum, rampant hi-hats, you know, all that kind of thing. It has to be very delicate. It has to fit the mood of the track, and this is a fundamental thing that needs to be thought of when you're doing any production, is to make the backing track musically and percussion wise an element. But I still wanted that percussion to be tight and strong. Right, the drums. Okay, let's have a look at that. So the basic vibe here, just very deep sort of vibe to it. On the drums. And if you look at the analyzer, you can see the strength in the. I always do this. I always have an analyzer open while I'm constructing everything, so I can see the frequencies, and you can see the vibe here. There's a little bit of a sort of loop inside there, as I've rendered this to audio as well. But already you can hear it's very deep, you know. Okay. To sort of add a little sort of flick to that, I added, there's an instrument called an ARP, ARP synthesizer, and I just added a little sort of side, little flick to it to give it a bit of extra rhythm. If you hear that on its own solo, it doesn't sound very interesting, but let's bring that in here. But you can see it on the analyzer. It's got a really nice sort of thud to it, and on the low end. And when I add that to the actual kick, you can actually see and feel that vibe. It's like so subtlety is the key here, first of all, as we build the rhythm. So there's the sort of basic sort of kick and some glistening sort of hat elements. Now with this one, I didn't want it to be super synthesized. I wanted it to be as much of a live feel as it could be, with still the strength of an electronic percussion. So I added this live hat in here, which is this element here. So the next one is this kind of vibe. So you can hear that, just a very gentle, and add it to the drums. So again, you can hear it's very, very deep. It's quite beautiful. It's not banging in your face, slamming away, but it's still got the power and the strength. So let's have a look. Right, the next section is I've got an upbeat, bright, open hi-hat. So just adding some elements of a bit more glisten at the top end. So you've got this with the live hats. So it's quite real. It's quite authentic. You know, not too synthesized. Okay, as we build it up, the next element, there's two claps actually on this. The first clap is on the percussion is down here, and it's got a sort of like sort of vibe in it as well. So that's the first sort of clap side of it, and added to this is quite a dull element, just to add another vibe to it. So there's this, it's very subtle, but over here, it's the word for the day, subtle, isn't it? So hit over here, this kind of different frequency. You can see the frequency that this is operating in. There's nothing at the ultra top end, nothing at the low. It's very MIDI, and there's very much sort of, it's almost like being bit crushed or taken down in sampling level to sort of like a Akai S950 kind of area. But you add that underneath this. If I take it out, this is the clappy, snappy sort of version. Add the dull one underneath. And it just gives that extra bit of body into the vibe. So far it's all picking up nicely. Very deep sort of house vibe. And as always with percussion, during the timeline, you know, the producers in the chat will know this well. You know, it's always a good idea to pick up the vibe as it goes on and add elements in the chorus, add things to lift certain sections. These little shakers here. So that just adds to the... And it's almost out of time, actually. You know, it's a quite... If you listen to that on its own, it sounds a little quirky and out of time. But once you put the rhythm in... Okay, so really nice rhythm, very deep, very cool, so we're liking that. Right, so the next element, this is an interesting one, because the track is you know, quite deep on the percussion side of it. What we wanted to do was to find something that would give a kind of, it's almost like not an Eastern flavour to it, but something that was unique. Casting the time machine back to about 20 years ago, for a track I did when I was in my Ministry of Sound production deal, I recorded real tablas back in, I think it was in Southall near London. So yeah, so I recorded tablas with an authentic tabla player. The dude was about, I don't know, it must have been in his 70s, and he was in this room, incredible room, and obviously they recorded a lot of stuff there with Asian percussion and the like. So I actually recorded a bunch of loops and tabla sounds for this track, and that track never actually got released. And I was chatting with Chuzza during the session, and basically I said, look, we need something like tablas. And then I suddenly remembered that I had this file, so I found the data disc from about 20 years ago and pulled out some sounds, and basically just had these two elements. One is a sort of very gentle slap on the tablas, and the other one is a sort of bottle effect. The guy played he didn't just play tablas, he was playing all sorts of instruments that clicked and banged and popped and whatever, and he played these bottle instruments, which was quite cool. So let me just play you some of those for a second. I'll just go back to the Logic screen. Right, so the tabla elements are down here, so let's have a look at these. And as you can see on the desk here, there's a lot of there's a nested kind of folder element here. These are the actual little clicks and pops. I've you know, rebuilt to match this rhythm. But there's so many slices of information on the audio file, you have to put them in a folder to copy and paste them, otherwise you're copy and pasting millions of things. But you can see the actual movement here. So you add that again to the main percussion. Again, subtlety is the word, but it's just got that sort of organic throat kind of percussion thing going on. It's beautiful, you know, and just let's build it back up again. And they only appear at certain points in the track. They're not running all the time. And that was a beauty of this as well, is that certain things pop in and out of the mix. It's not a thing that sort of like grows and grows and grows until it just destroys the place. It's you know, instruments come in and go out, etc. Okay, so you've got the basis of the drum track there, and So basically, that's the vibe so far. Cool. So the bass line is just very simple, 2 notes, simple as that, and it keeps glues the whole thing together. Okay, as with most tracks, during the course of any kind of track, you need some sort of elements that bring in new sections, whether that's a atypical crash cymbal, in the case of this a reverse cymbal, which I'll show you in a second, any kind of percussion, toms or white noise or anything like that. So I wanted some of that, but I wanted it to be subtle and non-predictable in this instance. So just going down to the bottom of the screen, where I usually put the other elements, is we've got these elements here. So just to bridge different areas, I've got a reverse crash, which is very, very subtle. And here it is. Simple as that. Simple as that. And you hear it in context. Simple as that. The next one is some really nice toms, and I want to show you the instrument that's used here. This is the tom pattern. I can double click to show it. This is the MIDI element down below here. If you look at the bottom of the screen, different levels, different instruments, and what's generating this is this plugin called the hex drum. And with this, you can do everything from sort of disco to sort of proper toms that have, you know, quite a lot of energy, and really design your own kind of vibe and almost make them in the musical key. And because we'd like to do things differently on this channel, folks. Not every fill is the same. Literally, there may be 3 or 4 different patterns. Like this is another one. So you know, I'd always encourage you to do different patterns. Like, and then you can actually pair them up with like some kind of a hit. Now, you heard the reverse cymbal, crash cymbal earlier on, the subtle one, but with this I've paired it with a white noise sample. Well, actually not a sample, I made this on a synth. But what you have to be aware of is the actual vibe here, because if I take if you look at the frequency, you've got to be very careful with things like white noise hits, etc. Because if I take off all of this on the channel strip, which is at the bottom left, let me just see if I can grab my pointer. So yeah, here I've got a channel EQ, a filter freak, an Echo Boy, and an RX 950. So let's just have a look at some of those elements, that chain, and we can go through it together. So look at the analyzer here, just on this noise, and this is going to pierce your ears probably. Okay, so that's it on its own. Okay, you can see the frequencies up in the 8K plus. So the first thing was a channel EQ, which basically just took out some of that low end. The next one is Filter Freak, which is a plugin from Sound Toys. So this is adding this. So it's gone from this to this. So it's like, okay, so that's the filter element. And then straight in line is a straightforward sort of echo effect, which is just called the Echo Boy. So again, Sound Toys. So it's in line. Sometimes you can send elements to an effect, or you can have it in line in the channel strip. In this case, it's that. But because they're elements, if you look again at the equalizer, you can see there's a lot of action up in this high frequency range, and that would be possibly too much in the mix. And when things hit in a high frequency like that, it tends to numb your ears for a few seconds while your ears adjust. So use this plugin called the RX950, and basically what that is, it's an emulation of the lower frequency sampling range of the Akai S950. So this is basically like a numbing filter. So with this engaged, it just takes a little bit of the bite out of that. Okay, let's move on. So we're back into the groove. We looked at all the percussion and the bass. Let's look at the instrumentation. So the first one we're looking at are the Rhodes stabs, which are, let's see if I can find the vibe here. So I'm going to introduce you to a secret weapon of mine. This thing has been a godsend for me. I mean, there are other samplers that I use within Logic. There's Logic's own sampler. There's the new one from Infonic as well. But Serato Sample, excuse me. Serato Sample is really such a powerful tool, and the algorithm is insane. And I'm going to show you how this actually works right now. So buckle yourselves in, this is going to get quite cool. So what you do with Serato Sample, you literally drop a whole element in. So what I've dropped into this is there was an instrumental, yeah, casting my mind back, there was an instrumental available of Careless Whisper, which was already a good head start, because what I did was I put that into the stem separation software, and it gave me more latitude to actually bandwidth to actually get in there and get what I needed. But as I said, you can't isolate an instrument. You can't say, right, I want a saxophone, or I want a keyboard, I want this. You tend to have to grab what it gives you and make the best of it. So with that said, let's have a look at it. So remembering that I've stem separated this is not from a multitrack. So this is Serato Sample. You drop the sample into here, and then it can auto generate different elements, i.e. where to actually trigger things. Let's have a look at the sequence first, so you understand what's actually playing. So we call this Rhodes stabs. They appear round about here. So let's go in and have a look. And you can see, if I look at the MIDI side of it, this is if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can, with the red sort of marks, you can see the elements that are in play here, and it's quite something. So I'm just going to play it, then we'll deconstruct it. So again, it's reinterpreting a classic, because what I've got here is if I just play the sample on its own. So it's quite beautiful, as you can hear, but basically what I've done there is reinterpreted that and used the Rhodes element, and as I said, reinterpreted it into a stab element. So I positioned all these elements here manually. You put these trigger points in, then lock them. So that's that one. So there you go. It's as simple as that. But the great thing about Serato Sample is you can change the real-time timing element if you wanted. In other words, time stretch it, retaining the same key. You can make it sync to the tempo you're working on, which is not always a good idea, because if it's elements like this, if there's got no tempo lock to it. You can change the key as well. So which we're not going to do. But as I said, this is how you can start to reinterpret a classic and use what you've got to make the best of it. So that, just to recap on that, that's this. The other element that's working in here is that I'm sending through a separate bus that to a plugin called Spiff. And because that element there, I'll just switch this off, that element was basically a stab. So listen to very carefully to the elements, how this is working, because once the Spiff plugin goes, that's a transient modeler. It basically takes any sound and gives it a bit more dynamic and power in its first instance, like the to it, so it hits the transient. So I'll play it without Spiff. And with. And you can dial in the amount of transient that you want to work with it. So it's from a company called Oek Sound, O-E-K Sound, and they do two plugins. One is Spiff, which is a transient designer, and the other one is Soothe 2, which is, it soothes higher frequencies and annoying frequencies, which I used a lot on a recent remix. Right, so that's quite an interesting vibe there. So again, using that same instrument and the same philosophy, let's move on to the next section. Which is Careless Whisper guitars and pads. So again, exactly the same philosophy, different instrument this time. Same instrument this time, but this is what this one is playing. So down here, these elements, I'll just solo. These are I'll call it Rhodes and Stabs. So exactly the same thing again. Another interesting thing that happens, and I think it's, I'm looking for a plugin to be activated because, right, here we go. So you see this plugin here, or this thing, I'll pull it up, it's called Crystallize. This is made by Sound Tools. This is quite an interesting slant to this sample that you've got. Right. Okay, so in that in that sort of run of samples, I've dissected the big saxophone. So basically, what this does, this is a plugin by. There's a set of plugins by Sound Toys, and my advice is to get the whole lot. And they've got this thing called a crystallizer, and it's like a granular synthesis thing. What it does, it takes elements of the original sound and slices into multiple grains, or like grains of sand, and does magic things with them. And using this particular preset and then adjusting it to the elements that I needed, it almost works a melody to the original vibe. You can hear it provides like a counter melody, so you'll hear it here. So you probably heard it just at that thing, and yeah, that's the crystallizer. It just adds that element, and you can change the feel, the organic movement of it, the mix, the gate and duck. In other words, how much of it responds to the original element, so you can do a nice balance there. So that's the crystallizer, which runs, and of course it works with that beautiful sax that's playing there. So I just wanted to show you that element too. So again, Serato sample to the rescue, absolutely amazing. You know, just rebuilding all the elements through. Actually, there's a few things happening here. There's a couple of elements going on. So you can see from here, there's a double up element happening in this area. So let's have a look what's happening. These are the actual live MIDI notes. So this is not recorded as an audio file. Ah, right, okay. So what I've done there is I've laid octaves from the original, so it'll go from this movement Logic's breaking up a bit there to stream and do this, I think. But anyway, you get the picture. Right, let's have a look what's next on the final part of the kind of reinterpreting the original. And again, it's the same story. This time, so Serato sample again for this, which is there's an intro element here, so it's down at the bottom. So there you go. You'll see as well the red elements down here are high velocity, and then different velocities work with the dynamic of the sample to make sure it's all balanced. So that's the reason we've got different colours there. I don't just do it randomly. So what are the elements in play here? Again, it's the same Serato sample again. Same vibe. However, there's two plugins that play here. One is sound tools again. Sometimes you stick with the good stuff. So the first element is this thing called the decapitator. Let's just take the phaser off for a second. So basically, this just provides oversaturation, not mega. It can distort, but it's kind of beautiful saturation that you can just make a sound from a gentle thing to have a bit of attitude. It's like a gentle thing with a sting. That's what this does. So if I take the decapitator off and play you the beginning. It's very nice, but you put this baby in. Just a touch of overdrive on it. It just adds that extra bite. Oh, by the way, one thing I did want to say about Serato sample as well, it's got a great feature where you can change the attack and the release of each sample. So if you've got a big sample from a record or a stem separated thing, and it sounds a bit abrupt at the end, going into the next one, you can always add a bit of sustained release that just lets the end of it, the sound previously, just drift into the next bit, so it's kind of almost a seamless movement. Just thought I'd mention that. The other thing is as well, there's a phaser. I love, from the days of Giorgio Moroder, etc. I love flanging, phasing, all that kind of stuff, and for this it particularly worked well. So with the phaser out, and with the phaser in, so yeah, once you put it in the track, it's absolutely beautiful. So let's have a look at other elements of that. What's happening further down the track? Let's have a look. There's something else down here, like a stab. Tonight the music feels so hard. That's that. What's this one? Yeah, that's some stabs that punctuate George, again from the stem separated file. So to recap right from the top, and this is probably where we're going to lose Facebook, because as soon as I hit this vocal in, it'll probably be, yes, your video has been blocked in 1,000 countries. Right, okay, so let's look right from the top, the George's lead. Now I remember having a conversation with Conan about this, because when I sent him 2 versions for mastering. One was with the there was so much of that 1980s glistening power, massive wash of reverb on George's lead vocal, which you can try and remove it with certain plugins, but the effect would have been ridiculous. Probably in this case it wouldn't have worked anyway. But so what I did was I kept it in and worked with it by adding flicked delays to sort of add to the end of phrases to make them carry over, etc. But I remember sending 2 versions to Conan for mastering. One was with George, the original bite on the reverb, the high frequencies, and one without. And we both chose the one that held the original bite, because once it went, it kind of lost its 80s character, which was quite bizarre. It still sounded good, and probably people wouldn't have noticed the difference, but to us, it was clear as night and day. So yeah, interesting production thing there. So with this one again, this was from an actual file that was available, and I stress that this wasn't separated. It was from an original file. It contained all the reverb of the original, but there was no backing vocals or other extra parts. So that's where the stem separated side of it comes in. So let's have a listen to George for a bit.
I feel so unsure as I take your hand and lead you to the dance floor. As the music dies, something in your eyes calls to mind a silver screen and all its sad goodbye.
If you notice as well, there's a fair bit of crossfading going on between each sample. These are crossfades. They just glue the thing together as regards one file going into another, because obviously timing had to be critical as well. And we did a lot of this stuff with the vocals for Searching and Searching and Luther Vandross, but much easier for this one. We changed the time signature on that one, or simple to compound. Anyway, back to this. So yeah, that's the vibe. I think Conan's popped in. So the reverb probably used was a Lexicon 224 or 480L reverb was probably used. He was heavily influenced by Vangelis and Blade Runner soundtrack. Lex 22 could be frozen to create those endless reverbs that Vangelis used a ton of Blade Runner. Great information, Conan. Thank you for that. So good vibes from Conan on that. So that's it, really. No need to go through all of this. However, this is where it gets interesting as regards different vibes. What I did here was to provide some sort of not these are pretty much clones of the original vocals. So the file that you see where it says George BVs, this bottom one, let me grab my mouse thing. Where are we? There. So this line here is built up. I think now it's either the original vocals but dry with no reverb, just to add slightly out of time, so it sounds like he's punching through, or I actually stem separated the whole lot again and use those just as a different flavour. And sometimes throwing in a bit of crunch, dirt, the bad stuff that would sound bad loud and on its own can add to the sweetness of the original. So that's what's happening here. So I'll just switch that little arrow off. That's good, I like that. Right, so let's see what's happening here.
I'm never gonna dance again. Guilty feet have got no rhythm.
And if I just play the one below it solo, so this is just the BVs here, or I've called it BVs.
Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Oh, it's easy to pretend. I know you're not fool.
Some of the other vocals are coming in because the solo doesn't automation. I won't bore you with it, but so that's just adding a bit of the a slightly dirtier version of the original just to add to it. But the other element, which is the Vox additional ones. So again, we're back to Serato sample on this. Oh, actually, I'll come back to the EQ on the other lead one in a second. So again, we've got these are the stem separated ones to try and catch the BVs. Actually, looking at the there's a plugin called FabFilter, and this is really good for taking out certain frequencies or reducing them and catching them, and it works on a method if you choose of dynamic EQ, and that basically doesn't kill everything on a certain frequency all the time. It only responds when it peaks at a certain level, and I think it might. There's another one working there as well, which is this one. Right. So if you look at let's see if I can solo this. So you can see there's two EQs here working that are responding to some of George's vocals. Let's put this there. Right, watch this.
Oh, it's easy to pretend. Should have known better to cheat a friend.
So you heard that should have known and right. When those hit, you can see the dynamic EQ operating, and then once they move, it pulls back so it doesn't obscure the rest of it. So dynamic EQ is your friend.
Oh, it's easy to pretend. Should have known better to cheat a friend. So I'm never gonna dance again the way I dance with you.
So you can see those EQs controlling those. If I didn't have those in and sent those to mastering with Conan, he would have struggled to actually isolate those and would have come back to me and said, "Can you sort it at your end?" Because he would be taking other frequencies down at that area. So it has to be at the pre-master area. So these are all from the stem separated ones. So we're moving over here now. So these BVs and harmonies were not on the original a cappella, but when you add them to the original,
Dance forever. Who's gonna dance with me? Please stay, and I'm never gonna dance again. Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Oh, it's easy to pretend. I know you're not fool. Should have known better to cheat a friend. Waste the chance that I'd been given. So I'm never gonna dance dance again the way I danced with you.
You can hear elements of the saxophone creeping in there. So yeah, controlling everything at source is very, very important. But you know, you can see the plug-in chain for the background vocals alone is insane. Well, not insane. I mean, it's by other certain standards. I mean, so this is it. Kicks off with without the plugins. Let's just take everything off here. You'll hear how this sounds. Right, so the first one is the Oxford inflator. This basically, it does what it says on the tin. It inflates the sound. It's so transparent. But you push in the input and then the effect usually to about 80 or 100% sometime. It's a classic Sonox maker. So it's going through the Sonox inflator. It gives it a bit of body on the way in. Then the next thing is this T-Rax EQ. And what this does, you can see I've dipped all the lower end anyway, but just a little bit of a push at 8K and 16. There's no frequencies there per se usually, but just by adding this plugin gives it a bit of width anyway and a bit of sparkle. But you've got to use it like a surgeon's knife. And the next one as well is just to give a bit of width to the sound. And I use again sound tools. So this adds it kind of emulates the Eventide pitch shifter, which just was a kind of a pseudo way of adding. You pitch down certain elements to it, a certain detunes on the left and right, and it's almost like an automatic double track. It brings a mono vocal into a more wraparound stereo. There were various ways of doing this, but with that in, it just brings that through, and then of course the Pro EQ. So now, if you're listening on headphones, this. So as soon as that micro shift is in, that just makes the vocal pow right wraps around your head with still that strength in the mono side of it. And obviously there's reverbs and delays and stuff going on here, but you get the vibe anyway. So that's the plug-in chain, and the plug-in chain which we haven't discussed for the main lead vocal. As I said, this is a professionally recorded pass here. I mean, but nonetheless, these are the tricks that we used on this one. So the first one is, again, the TR5 T-Rax EQ, which basically adds that sparkle. I got this little trick from my dear friend Sani, who gave me the heads up on this this plugin. Even if it's just sat there literally doing nothing, it still adds a bit of vavavoom to it. It's something quite cool. So thank you, Sani, for that. So that goes through there, and then this is an interesting one, the MV2, which is a Waves plugin. And what the MV2 does, it's a kind of a intelligent compressor in a way, but it's a very simple GUI, user interface, to actually to work. And what it does, you can independently increase the lower level elements as regards the decibel level, the volume, and you can decrease the higher level one. So you've got separate control very easily over the two. So with George's vocal, I pushed those to bring the lower level up a bit and the higher levels. And you can see it working here. You'll see the lower levels being pumped up and the higher levels being controlled.
I feel so unsure as I take your hand.
If I take that out,
I feel so unsure.
I mean, it's subtle, but again.
As I take your hand and lead you to the dance floor.
So there you go, that just adds that element. And then the final part of the chain is, and it had to be necessary for this, is a de-esser. A de-esser basically takes out the S's and sibilants in a vocalist delivery, and just controls, recognizes the peaks and controls them. So it's a simple de-esser, but necessary on this, especially with all that glistening reverb on there, amplifying it all. So this is the de-esser in the middle at work. When George sings so, if you look here, in this meter, you'll see every time George hits an S or a T or whatever, that thing kicks in and just controls it and sort of numbs it down a bit. So again, those little spiky frequencies don't kill your ear, so to speak.
I feel so unsure as I take your hand and lead you to the...
You saw that when you got two, it really just controls those elements. By the way, this track 5 here that you can see is George mastered. That's automation. If I put the automation on there, you can see this is basically a volume automation. So controlling the entire. It's not just frequencies that you have and general levels. You've really got to work on the controlling certain things in the level. So this is like an automation track. There's no audio on it. There's no MIDI information. It's just right at this point, dip the level or change this or send this there or blah blah blah. What I do at the end of every mix, did it on the recent I Feel Love to Love, is mute everything and go through, solo all the vocals and do a double, triple, quadruple check that everything is no vocal is overpowering another and everything is in the right area. So I'm very fastidious about this, and this is why this automation, you write this stuff in or you control it in with faders or whatever you want, but that's what this track is. It's automation. So we have literally, I think, gone through just about everything there. We've been through the drums, the percussion, the elements, the sort of transition elements. We've shown you the breakdown of the keyboards, how that works with Serato sample, how it's been reconstructed. We've gone through the vocal, and that's pretty much the vibe. As I said, somebody asked the question earlier on, how long does it take? I think probably if you put everything together in a solid working week, 1 week, Monday to Friday, if it was non-stop every single day without a break or whatever. So it depends on the project really, but so just to recap, this, and I'm sure Shizzle will put the link in soon, this remix is available on mastermixdj.com. Link will be in the chat. You can buy it legally and play it. As are my other remixes, and we've got a brand new drop coming to Mastermix at the end of or later on this year. Big thanks to everybody for joining me. Thank you to Shizzle for holding it together. Lily, thank you for coming in so early in your day. Thanks for all the questions. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll be doing another few of these throughout the rest of the year. Hopefully, mostly on Sunday afternoons, I would imagine, where we break down all the remixes we do. Thank you for your company, everybody. Thanks for the questions. Take care. Have a great day.